Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with aBlogtoWatch. Please subscribe to our videos on YouTube and like this video if you find it useful. I'm here to talk about 5 quirky ways that the Apple Watch pays homage to traditional watches. This is not just about the Apple Watch Series 3, which is this one. You can see that by the red colored crown there. This is related to other models, and I believe this has the Watch OS 4. And I really want to talk about some interesting things that you may not notice in this watch in regard to the software that are quirks that you may not understand, and they really go back to traditional watches. So the first thing is there's a setting you can use to move the time as you turn the crown either direction. Apple calls it time travel, and it really doesn't do too much more than replicate the experience of taking a traditional watch and moving the crown to change the time in either direction. It's a way of playing with the watch, and the good news here is that when you're done, the watch can go back to the correct time. Now let's talk about some of the complications that are a little bit quirky, and this goes into number 2. I'm looking right here for the moon phase. Traditional watches have a complication, not all of them, but some of them, which is a moon phase indicator, and the idea is to tell you the phase of the moon. Now, a lot of people using the Apple Watch might ask themselves, what is the whole point of having multiple ways in order to indicate the phase of the moon? What is the use of that? In fact, you don't just have a graphical representation of the moon phase, but you can have a text version as well, waxing crescent. So there's multiple ways on various dials of indicating the current phase of the moon, and that's a direct homage to a lot of traditional watches that had moon phase indicators. Let's go to the settings for a second and go to time. This is where the third thing is. Now, a lot of people in the past, or I guess they still do today, routinely set their clocks or watches a little bit ahead in order to give themselves the illusion of a few extra minutes. The idea is that if you set your watch 5 minutes ahead, you might, if you're always late, rethink that it's 5 minutes ahead in the future and actually give yourself 5 minutes. So what you can do here is actually just set the watch up to an hour ahead in order to artificially give yourself a few extra minutes. So now I have plus 5 minutes, and it really thinks it's 1:13 and not 1:08. Now, this isn't strictly speaking an homage to traditional watches, and it isn't something that I believe is entirely unique to the Apple Watch, but this ability to set the time in advance by minute, easily take it back, is something I haven't seen before, and it's sort of a direct homage to something that people used to do with their traditional watches. The fourth thing is the dials that are available to you to tell the time. The Mickey, of course, is one of the most direct homages to old timepieces because Mickey used to have watches out there. They still exist. They're not very good these days, where Mickey's hands told the time. More generally speaking, if you look at the available dials, these are just some of them. I chose some and not all of them. I chose the ones that I like. But a lot of them, the chronograph, color, simple, utility. Most of these dials are analog and meant to look a lot like traditional watches. In fact, some of the only forward-thinking, or I would call the modern watch dials, are things like astronomy and solar, but they still are heavily representative of traditions in time-telling of old watches, such as the fact that, of course, this is a AM/PM indicator with this little graph right here showing the day-night cycle. It's obviously night right now, but this is very much related to sort of the core essence of telling the time. I haven't seen a lot in the Apple Watch which is related to being very futuristic or modern. Even this one, for example, which is fun, still in many ways is an homage to old watch designs because it's very analog. In fact, the only digital ones are ones where the time is simply indicated digitally there, or probably a little bit more interesting in something like the modular that has lots of different pieces of information available for you. But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, most of the watch dials on the Apple Watch are heavily inspired by traditional watch dial design. Maybe in the future, Apple will be able to go off on its own and have slightly more modern, unique takes on telling the time. The last interesting thing that's definitely an homage to traditional watches is found only on the Mickey or Mini dial for now. And if you tap it,
it's 1:16.
It tells the time. Now, why would you want to do that? Traditional watches sometimes have a feature called a minute repeater. And a minute repeater complication is quite expensive because it's very complicated, is a device that mechanically sounds back the time to you in the form of chimes. Obviously, you don't have to listen to chimes here, but the idea was that you could know the time in the dark or when you're not actually looking at your watch.
It's 1:16.
So the ability to tap the dial on the Mickey or Mini is in a sense a little homage to minute repeaters and other traditional watches that tell the time via chimes and gongs and things of that nature. So those are 5 cool little quirks where the Apple Watch is directly homaging traditional watches in pretty fun ways. Thanks.